So it's hard to believe it's been over 4 weeks since the unfortunate passing of Samson, my Queensland Saratoga. And during that time, I've been pondering, I guess, the future of this aquarium display. It's a 12 foot by 4 foot by 2 foot high freshwater native planted aquarium that was specifically designed around the Australian arowana or the Queensland Saratoga. Decked out with these sliding screens, specifically to keep a jumping fish contained and safe. I do need to do some maintenance on the tank. I've got some water changes to do, some algae to scrape, a great deal of plant pruning to do. So I think that's a good opportunity to jump in and do that, bring you along for the ride. That way you'll learn a little bit of how this system runs, and then we can deep dive into what I think is the fishy future for this display. When I built this tank, I very specifically installed a bulkhead fitting exactly 1/2 of the way down the back wall of this tank. That means that if I drain the water down to this point here, it's exactly a 50% water change, which in this case is a 1,000 litre water change. And to make it nice and easy, I simply hook up this 1.5 inch pull hose, open that valve up, let the water drain out to the garden outside. I do find that because of the timber I've used, it does leach a fair amount of tannin into the water, which has the propensity to make it appear a little bit yellow. I do like to do about a 50% water change on my freshwater tanks about once a week. You might be wondering why this tank is only 2 foot high, considering its dimensions are 12 foot long. It's a very shallow tank considering the footprint it takes up. And that's because I made it from plywood and recycled glass from broken down 6x2 and 4x2 foot aquariums. And it was just an easy way of reusing glass. Obviously it would look probably slightly better if it was taller, but still having a 48 square foot footprint, it's a good sized tank. It's about 2,000 litres, which is what, 500 gallons. It's funny, a lot of people think they want to have a 4 foot deep tank. I've got a 3 foot deep tank in Palau Reef, my turtle tank outside, a 2.5 foot deep tank over in the Seaway. This being only 2 foot, maintenance is so much easier when you can reach down with a cloth like this and just wipe all the way along the glass without having to worry about step ladders and extension poles. The bare area just here is where I removed some of the Nymphoides lilies, which are those guys bent over back there, and I've planted them just down that end. The hairgrass is slowly growing into that area. I've got 2 types of hairgrass. This is the dwarf hairgrass, this section here, and the section that's down there, and of course planted all the way along the front there. And then I have a taller hairgrass towards the back and a little bit growing up through this area. This carpeting plant and this great big massive carpeting plant, it's absolutely beautiful. It's a hydrocotyl, I think it's hydrocotyl tripetata, and it's done absolutely fantastically, growing all over the timbers and spreading out towards the substrate. It does need a prune. Back, you can see that my crinum lily, that's the one that was mounted to the piece of driftwood and has its roots going down in the substrate. The smaller one, which spends most of its time underwater, is doing fine. Some new leaf growth coming up through there, so I'm really happy with the outcome of the Crinum pedunculatum. I did pull some Hygrophila polysperma, which in my area is a little bit of a weed. It does occur in some of the creeks and rivers around my area. I did pull some of it out. You can see I've planted it around the backdrop there, and it's growing quite well and showing some very nice pink coloration. And I did have to prune back my grass a fair bit because a lot of the original stems and leaves that were collected by myself were dying off underwater, so I had to remove a lot of that to prevent excess ammonia, but that'll reshoot back. With the water level drained down the way it is, I think it's a good opportunity to prune this hydrocotyl without getting too messy. What my aim is to just uncover some of the driftwood. I think one of the biggest mistakes in horticulture is to not prune decisively, and it's sometimes aggressively, because you think that the plant looks, or the garden looks attractive at that time. The problem is it'll quickly get overgrown and lose the structure, and it won't look so attractive. So what I'm going to try and do is just uncover the lines of the driftwood roots and prune the remaining level of the hydrocotyl to those lines. The natural line between the hydrocotyl and the dwarf hairgrass that I want to point out to you, that I think it's important to know when you're pruning your plants, and particularly ground covers. The longevity of the display, and in particular the health of the plants, I want to do my best to keep them separated. So again, I've found that line and I've started pruning along here to that line. I'll continue along here, and that way it maintains the separation but doesn't allow one plant to smother another. And you know, I was a bit lazy a couple of weeks ago, so I decided not to prune this pocket when I had finished pruning all of that area there. And what I'm going to show you is what happens, how the plant wants to grow upwards and outwards, but can leave a darkened area underneath that could potentially cause the ground cover to lift off the substrate because the growth stops underneath, and then the whole mat can float away. So what I really need to do now is to get stuck into all that top section, prune it right down. It's going to look pretty lousy, and encourage it to grow flattened across the substrate once more. You can see just how much I've pruned away just from this section of hydrocotyl up here. See just how twisted they get. There's one of the outputs from the filtration system, and the second is just over there, and you can probably see the wave maker tucked down just down there, and that's to keep this whole hairgrass area nice and swept clean. I did remove the lilies from this patch here, hence the reason why it's still filling in with the hairgrass, and I planted them just down in here because again they were just getting tangled up. So to replant these, cut the foliage off, leave the crown intact, trim the roots. The filtration for this tank is a really simple one. It consists of a Laguna 15,000 max jet pump, which is sitting just over inside the tank over there. And it's feeding its way into this agricultural disc filter. I'm going to take this apart very soon so you can see what's inside, but it's a filter that was used on my farm for pre-filtering the irrigation water before I pumped that through drip irrigation. It consists of a stack of discs that are compressed together. You can vary the compression, and it filters, I think this one filters down to roughly 120 micron. Just like any surface with a large surface area, you are going to get colonizing bacteria, and that will of course allow for the nitrification of ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate. But to be honest with you, it's the plant growth in the aquarium which is really most important for me to remove nitrogenous waste from the water. Separate this disc filter out. I need to close that valve, which is the feed of water into it. I need to close that valve, which is the feed of water back to the aquarium. Close that valve, which is a side feed through a carbon filter, and then I can undo these nuts and remove it. So to remove the disc filter, you just need to undo this stainless steel spring clamp that holds the top to the base. There's the disc itself, and we can just tip out the remaining water from the base. So the disc filter works by compression, and the water is forced through these discs under compression. To clean it, you need to undo this bit of a nut, pull that apart, and that allows the discs freedom to move. And what I like to do, hence the reason I haven't got a microphone on, is set it up to spin, baby, spin. Now I repurposed an old RODI canister to house my activated carbon. I'll open it up and I'll show you a little bit of a modification I did inside. So you can see in the bottom of the canister that nipple, and that's what I've got, this 20mm pipe that will fit down onto nice and firm. Like that. Water is pumped down through there, it passes up through the carbon, can't get past the sponge and goes back to the tank. Easy. There's this one's for carbon, I could have Purigen, I could have Matrix, I could have anything in them really. Phosphate remover was a reef tank. And all I do is put that sponge back over the top like that. I go and shove some fresh water through there just to rinse out some fines and goes back on the tank. So with freshwater aquariums that are large, it's tempting to skip the use of dedicated aquarium lighting and try and adapt lighting from another industry. In my case here, I've got two LED vents or LED vents, high bay LEDs. I've got one here, it's 150 watt, and another just over here, another 150 watt. And the reason I chose to use those was I was hoping I'd get a nice wide expanse of light, and they offered a 6,500 Kelvin spectrum, which is effectively daylight. And I thought to myself, well, that's going to mean that they won't be quite as yellow. I'm also running along the back wall of the aquarium 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Aquascape 35 watt pendants. I had those lying around and thought they might be able to be used to bring out some colour, some additional colour in the plants and the fish, which they absolutely do. What I'm going to do is turn off all the lights. I'm going to turn on the industrial LED lighting by itself. I'll turn it off. I'll turn on the freshwater Aquascape pendants by themselves, and then the both together, and you'll really get a handle on the quality of the light that comes from aquarium lighting versus industrial lighting. So this is the lighting with just the LED 150 watt 6,500 Kelvin high bay industrial lighting. You can see that although it's a white light, it does have a slight yellow tone to it, despite the fact that it does say that it's 6,500 Kelvin. And for large aquariums and large freshwater aquariums, it's very tempting to cut corners and use these types of lighting. But after seeing the lighting that comes from those small Aquascape pendants I'm going to show you shortly, as well as some Chihiros lighting that I picked up, it's quite clear that the high bay lights belong in my shed ceiling and not over my aquariums. Let me turn these off and just turn the Aquascape lights on. See across the back the Aquascape pendants shining down over the planted area, and that I have the larger high bay lighting off. This was the Chihiros lights I was telling you about. I've got it over here over a cave mini aquarium which I'll be working on shortly. It's a really crisp white. This is the WRGB Slim, where you control the channels individually. And my experience with these lights, as well as the Bioscape lights in this aquarium, is that it really brings out the colours of the fish, those reds and those intense colours, as well as the deep greens, which you just don't get from these industrial style lights. So definitely my plan is to remove these LED high bays, pop them back up into the ceiling of the shed, and instead invest in a bunch of 4-foot Chihiros lighting, install it hanging as a grid above the aquarium. I'll still keep the Bioscape 35 watt pendants along the rear, but I feel like that's really going to bring out the coloration that this tank deserves. You can see the colours popping just there underneath that reddish tone of those Bioscape pendants. So currently living in this aquarium is a group of crimson spot rainbow fish, which I've been progressively bringing in from my outdoor turtle aquarium, as well as a variety of gudgeons. There's some empire gudgeons and some purple spot gudgeons, and probably most obviously a pair of yellow-eyed mullet or freshwater mullet and a pair of sea mullet. Now, none of the fish currently in the aquarium are necessarily permanent, with the possible exception of the mullet. The rainbow fish I brought in for a very specific reason. I think I've got a bit of a plan. And I think to public aquariums that house sharks and other predatory fish like sharks' rays in their large displays with trevally and other pelagic fish. Now they're not eating those other fish all the time, but potentially they may have snacked on a couple when they were first introduced and before they were target trained with their feeding. So my intention with this aquarium is to develop a display where we do have some predatory fish that are cohabiting with what might be considered prey fish. I'm very curious about the concept of keeping the sooty grunter and the spangled perch in this aquarium. Both are considered traditionally as being very aggressive fish. My research and my conversations with my good friend has led me to believe, or to understand I should say, that most of their aggression occurs a little bit like tiger barbs in an aquarium, where they like to be kept in a group and then their aggression will be focused inwards as opposed to targeting other fish in their surrounds. So my method will be to obtain some small specimens of those species, to obtain a number of specimens, maybe about 5 of each, and to feed them only pellets, to train them only on pellets to the point where they only recognize pellets as food. Introduce them into this aquarium amongst a great big school of crimson spot rainbow fish, which I've bred myself, and hopefully they will continue to only recognize pellets as food, and being roughly the same size as the surrounding horde of rainbow fish will leave those alone. But if I do happen to lose a couple, well, they're local rainbow fish which I bred myself from my own aquarium, so I guess that's not quite so bad. It sounds bad, I know it sounds bad, but it could be worse if I was to go and invest in many hundreds of dollars worth of Monotania trifasciata goiter river rainbows, or some of the salmon reds, or some of the New Guinea turquoise or lacustrous rainbows. Once I'm happy with the demeanour of the other fish, the perch, the grunter in this aquarium, I can start swapping out these crimson spots. They can go back to my outdoor tank and I can bring in the new rainbow fish. But as you know, this tank was built not for rainbow fish, grunters or spangled perch. It was built for a Saratoga. It was built for Samson the Saratoga. So am I going to keep a Saratoga in this aquarium? Now after I lost Samson the Saratoga, it was a rough trot. And I've spent that time considering what to do with this aquarium as a display. And the realization dawned that I built all of this, all these sliding screen doors, And this protection specifically to house a large Australian jumping and pretty amazing fish. I did consider maybe I could install some more branches, get some Australian water dragons or some eastern water skinks and have a bit of a paludarium. But let's face it, this tank was renovated and then built to house a Queensland Saratoga. And with that being said, I've had a very generous offer from a new friend of a Saratoga to go into this aquarium. She's a big girl. She's going to be a bit bigger than what Samson was. And initially I was very reluctant to accept the offer because I didn't want it to seem like that I've had one loss from my tank and I'm just going to replace the fish. That's not what I'm about whatsoever. But this tank was set up for a purpose, not only to house the fish, but to actually try and inspire, entertain, but inspire other people to set up monster style fish in an aesthetic way that can also drive empathy and inspiration in other people that come and visit. And it's hard to do that for a Saratoga unless I have a Saratoga in this tank. So in the not too distant future, you'll be coming with me to come and visit my brand new friend a couple of, I'm not sure to say a couple of hours, about a 5 good hour drive north. We're going to do plenty of freshwater exploring. We're going to do plenty of saltwater exploring. Hopefully have a bit of a tour through his own ponds and tanks. And then an educational video for you and other keepers of large fish on how to safely handle, catch and transport them back to your own aquarium. And to seeing once again the amazing shape of a Saratoga or the Australian arowana swimming in this 500 gallon or 2,000 litre fully planted native aquarium. Thanks for watching. If you've got any questions you'd like to be answered in my videos, don't forget, you can pop them down below in the comments and just say answering video and I'll give you a deep dive into exactly what it is that you're hoping to see. I'll see you next time on the Australian Aquarist. Thank you for watching. Over and out.